Hi, today I'm going to take a crack at installing the motor in the car. It's sitting here. We had to revise the motor coupler because the clutch spline on this M58 transmission was different than the clutch spline on the M58 that I used to be working on. So I had to redo this. Consequently, we have to balance this unit before I install it. If you recall an earlier video, I balanced this by hanging it in the air and spinning it up and then moving it around until it no longer fluctuated. Can't do that because there's a car attached to it now. So instead what I'm going to do is use a mechanics or a machinist's gauge to make sure that it's spinning in round the way it's supposed to. So I'll show you what I got set up here in just a second. So you see I've got a machinist's gauge rigged up to the motor coupler, and right now when I rotate it, it's showing some variation. There's a high spot and a low spot basically, and what I need to do is figure out where the high spot is, loosen the bolts, tap it down until this needle isn't wiggling much. It's riding on the actual spot. Let's see if I can even get that in there, in frame. The needle rides on the collar that fits over the spline and measures to the extent that it's out of round or out of balance, it'll make that needle wiggle. And right now it's wiggling 20 thousandths of an inch. I want to get it down, well, two things, because it's going in at an angle instead of at right angles to the rotation. The actual variation is larger than that. I'm not going to do the trig, but it's the case. I'm going to try to get this reading down to 15 thousandths because, yeah, and then I'll hope that the rubber guibo takes care of any other slop. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I think we got it down to about within an acceptable range. Now this angled reading again is low, but we're talking a third of what it was. So I think we're going to call it good. So here we have the motor turning over, and you can see the run out on the thing. It's a little more than I want, but frankly, I think it's pretty good. There's going to be some slop in there, so I think we're going to call it good. Not delighted with it, but I'm not super apprehensive. So we'll see. Okay, so after endless fooling around, I've got the engine adapter plate in place on the transmission. I had to drill a new hole, of course, and mess around and mess around. That's on there. So the next step is to dry fit the electric motor, which you can see I'm using the engine hoist. The motor weighs like 85 pounds. I could lift it up and hoist it in there by brute strength, but I couldn't delicately align everything. So the idea here is that I can balance this thing and get it nice and level and get it to the point where I slide it in so there's no resistance. Everything just lines up perfectly. And then bolt it in place. It's another thing about where I'm trying to worry about alignment. So with this great big honking machine, I can actually do it with some delicacy. So let's see if we can't get this thing lined up and ready to slide in. Good morning. So today we're going to try and put this thing in here, get everything to line up, get it to do the thing. I've taken the wheel off so that these support legs for the engine hoist can roll underneath the car. You can bring this thing in. Let's level it. Get it to just slide onto the spline with zero, as close to zero resistance as possible, assuming that that will be lined up, and then we will bolt it in place. I've got the ticky marks on here for when it was balanced, lined up to the ticky marks. There's some ticky marks left on the engine mount plate. So we'll see. I'm going to start muscling this thing around. I got to hoist it up, a foot more, and we can lower her down and see what we can do. There we go. There we go. Okay, it's about 40 minutes later. I've got, it's on the spline, it's aligned, I think, in this bolt. What the hell? Oh, it's a 12, okay. So I gotta find 12 millimeter wrenches to pull this thing in. I had to loosen this plate on the transmission before the bolt holes would line up, which of course I knew I'd have to do. And now I just gotta kind of, it's partway in. I gotta rotate this around and then use the bolts to pull it in. So that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna find different wrenches. Always something. Endless farting around is just the long and the short of any of this project. Endless farting around. Back in a second. So one of the other things I do for fun is build acoustic guitars. And one of the things I always say, because I'm an old fart, that's what old farts do, is I say you can never have enough wood clamps. Well, that even applies when you're doing something crazy like putting an electric motor in an old Volvo. You just can't beat the control, precision, and usefulness of a wood clamp. At this point, I've managed to slide this motor onto the spline And it is mated. So now I'm going to put some bolts loosely in here. And maybe we can actually get this thing, we'll wiggle it around until I can kind of move it in and out freely. Not a lot of pain and grief. And we will bang on this plate and how that mates, and we'll wiggle until it just will move in and out without any resistance at all. At least that's my theory. That's my hope. It's too short. And then we're going to say that that's aligned. That's probably foolishness. But, you know, what the hell. It's not like the future of a motor car company depends on my engineering here. It's just me screwing around. I almost violated YouTube's thing there. But there you go. I don't think I've dropped the F-bomb in any of these videos, which is kind of remarkable, because I am known for having salty language. And I have been sorely provoked from time to time during the course of this project. The temptation to use salty language has been overwhelming at times. All right. Thank you for the wood clamps. I'll never be able to use these again on a guitar because they've got oil now impregnating the rubber pads, and that would leave stains on the clamped surfaces of the guitar. Ask me how I know that. Even if you clean them, there's still oil in the pores and it'll get out on the wood, and then there's more occasion for salty language. So, you know, I'm going to add more bolts. I will come back in a minute with a different shot, hopefully with this contraption that's holding the motor up gone. We now have everything bolted in place and the bolts snugged up, and as a final test of how well or poorly the alignment is, I'm just going to turn this over by grabbing this and giving it a spin, and even with my hand strength, it's just there's no resistance. The transaxle's in neutral, and so everything's just turning nicely. I think we're going to need to revise a few of the bolts, add a couple more, but basically this thing is installed, and I'm now going to unhook this thing and roll it away. So back in a second. In place, everything's cleaned up, car's jacked down. Next step will be to add an additional motor mount in the back there to support the weight of the motor, because right now it's hanging off of two motor mounts and it's just kind of cantilevered out there. And then we have to rig up a support for the bearing you can see there on that drive shaft, which is typically bolted to the back of the engine in a Volvo, and of course that engine ain't there. So I have the bracket that came with it, that came off the engine. I just need to jury rig something that will make it support that drive shaft in parallel with the motor. And then this physical install is done, and we move on to batteries, cabling, and the motor controller. After that, we can try to drive it around the block. Thanks. Bye.